Champlain room microphone test.
Good morning, everyone. We have a quorum of Planning Committee in the room, so I'll call the committee to order and welcome everyone to the 60th meeting of the committee for this term of council. It is Tuesday, the 24th of September, a little after 9:30. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed as items 9 to 12 and 14 on today's agenda. For those items listed above, only those who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the Ontario Municipal Board. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the Ontario Municipal Board if Council does not adopt an amendment within 120 days of receipt of the application for zoning and 180 days after for an official plan amendment. That's after receipt of a complete application. Une feuille de commentaires est disponible à l'entrée pour toute personne désirant soumettre des commentaires écrits concernant les modifications. In addition, there are, if you want to speak to the committee with respect to any of the items that are on the agenda, at the table right under the big Ottawa sign over there, there is a request to speak form. If you'd like to, you can fill that. Not if you like to. You have to fill that in and submit it to the committee assistant to my right. However, if you don't want to speak to the committee but you want to provide written comments, you can do so. There is a comment sheet over under the big Ottawa sign that if you fill in comments, you will make sure they become part of the record, the public record, and preserve your appeal rights on these matters. So, members of committee, are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Shirelli.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I, Rick Shirelli, declare potential deemed pecuniary interests on Planning Committee Agenda Item 60, Number 10, Official Plan and Zoning Montreal Road District Secondary Plan, as my brother, acting as a real estate consultant, began business discussions seeking to place a client in a property at 444 Montreal Road yesterday and may be involved in the above item.
Okay. Thank you very much. So you will absent yourself from your seat in the room when we're discussing that item. Okay. Members of committee, confirmation of minutes, the minutes 50. No, Councillor, you have to sit through the rest of the items until we get to that one. Minutes 58, August 27th, 2013, and minutes 59, the 10th of September, 2013. Are those carried? Carried. Okay, we're going to go through a bit of a consent agenda, and we'll come back to the ones where there are presentations. We have item number 1, which is the Neighborhood Connection Office Toolkit. We're going to come back to that, and we're going to receive a presentation on that item. But there are no people registered to speak to the committee with respect to that item. If you wish to speak to the committee with respect to item number 1, if you'd fill in a request to speak form at the table and bring it up here, that would be great when we get to it. Item number 2 is an application to alter the Transportation Building, 10 Rideau Street, a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. I have no one registered to speak to the committee with respect to item number 2. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to the committee with respect to item number 2? Members of the committee, is that item carried? Carried. Now, item number 3 is an application to alter 410 Wood Avenue, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. I have no one registered to speak to the committee with respect to item number 3. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to the committee with respect to item number 3? Is item number 3 carried? Carried. Okay. Item number 4 is an application to alter 429 McLaren Street, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in the Centertown Heritage Conservation District. There's no one registered to speak to the committee with respect to item number 4. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to the committee with respect to item number 4? No. Members of committee, is this item carried? Carried. Item number 5 is the designation of the Charles Billings House at 187 Billings Avenue under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. I have no one registered to speak to the committee with respect to item number 5. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to the committee with respect to item number 5? Okay. Members of the committee, is this item carried? Carried. Item number 6 is status update, planning committee inquiries and motions for the period ending the 17th of September 2003. I have no one registered to speak to the committee with respect to that item. Is there anyone in the audience who should speak to the committee with respect to item number 6? No? Okay. Members of the committee, is this item received? Received. Item number 7 is the draft infrastructure master plan. There is no one registered to speak to the committee with respect to item number 7, the 2013 draft infrastructure master plan. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to the committee with respect to item number 7? And members of committee, we are, although it says to be issued separately and tabled at the meeting, you're getting the plan, but the recommendation is that planning committee approve the infrastructure master plan be tabled for further consideration through the ongoing comprehensive official plan review process. So there's no one in the audience who wishes to speak to the committee with respect to this item. Members of the committee, is this item carried? Or I guess it's carried, yeah. Carried, tabled, I guess is the better terminology. Received for tabling. Yeah. Okay. Item number 8 is the comprehensive zoning bylaw 208-250, minor anomalies and minor corrections, third report 2013. We have no one registered to speak to the committee with respect to item number 8. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to the committee with respect to item number 8? Okay. Members of the committee, is this item carried? Carried. Okay. Item number 9 is an official plan technical amendment, City of Ottawa statutory advertising. We have no one registered to speak to the committee with respect to this item. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to the committee with respect to item number 9? Okay. Members of committee, is this item number 9 carried? Carried. Okay. Item number 10 is...
The one I'm declaring on, so.
Yes, one you're declaring interest in. We have a number of speakers to that item, so we're going to come back to it. Item number 10, and we're going to come back to that one. Okay. Item number 11, we have is the zoning at 628 Industrial Avenue, and we do have Mr. Koshman and Mr. Laundrie. Mr. Laundrie, are you here? Okay. And you want to speak to the committee, and you oppose the application?
No, but I do have this clarification that I require because the traffic on Coronation Avenue, because
Okay.
has increased dramatically.
Okay. So why don't, just a second, you can, Mr. Koshman and Mr. Holtzman, maybe if you want to talk to Mr. Laundrie about his issue, and I don't know who the staff person is, because we're going to have a presentation, and item number 10 will come before it. So you may want to meet with the delegation and see if you can resolve that issue. And if you can, great, and we'll come back to it. So, Mr. Mitzi, if you make sure that the staff person is there for Mr. Laundrie and Mr. Holtzman. Okay? So, sir, we'll come back to it. If you can't resolve it with Mr. Holtzman and Mr. Koshman and city staff, we'll come back and you'll have a hearing before committee. If you'll be able to resolve it, it'll all be good. So, okay, so we'll hold that one and come back to it. And there was also, so, item number 12 is, item number 12 is the zoning at blocks 13, 14, 20, 22, 24 on Plan 4M, 1483, formerly known as part of 2233 Mayor Blue Road, and that's for the zoning. Now, Mr. Phillips, you've registered to speak to the committee. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak to the committee with respect to item number 12, the zoning blocks 13, 14, 20, 22, and 24 on Plan 4M 1483, formerly known as part of 2233 Maribel Road? No? I'll get to that. And Mr. Phillips, you don't need to speak to the committee. I know there's some motions. Are you aware of those motions? And you support those motions? Okay, perfect. Now, the motion is to withdraw the holding zone provision because apparently we've gotten clearances from the appropriate people that we no longer require that. That's correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and we need to send this to council tomorrow because, as I understand it, they're trying to get serviced before the fall, the ground freezes, and they've been delayed trying to get these clearances, if I understand the situation correctly. So, on the technical amendments, are they carried? Perfect. On the item, is it carried? Carried. Now, on the sending to council tomorrow, is that carried? Carried. Perfect. Excellent. Thank you very much. Item number 13 is the revised area-specific development charge rate for the connection of two existing portions of Provence Avenue. I don't have anyone registered to speak to the committee with respect to item number 13. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to the committee with respect to item number 13, revised area-specific development charge rate for the connection of two existing portions of Provence Avenue? Members of the committee, is that item carried? Carried. Okay. Item number 14 is the zoning at 20 Cope Avenue, Cope Drive, sorry. There's one person registered to speak to the committee with respect to this item, Mr. McGilligan. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak to the committee with respect to the zoning at 20 Cope Drive? Mr. McGilligan, you're in support of the recommendation? Okay. You don't need to speak to the committee if we're prepared to carry this item? Okay. Thank you very much. Members of committee, is this item carried? Carried. Okay. Okay. Let's go back to item number 1.
Mr. Chairman, members of committee, we are pleased today to provide you with a demonstration of the Neighborhood Connection Office toolkit that has been developed. Before we give you a demonstration of the toolkit, I'd like to introduce you to the team. I have to my right Ms. Flowers, and to her right Ms. Boswell, and we have Ms. Strachan in the audience, and this team is led by Alain Miguelez. So there's been several concepts in play for some time for this toolkit, but we really put pen to paper in this past year. We have consulted with a number of internal departments, as well as some of our counselors' offices and their staff. We've also consulted with community groups and organization leaders. We really wanted to get a sense of a do-it-yourself toolkit to assist residents and community groups to be able to execute neighborhood projects within their community. So, of course, the Neighborhood Connection Office currently works in 4 different neighborhoods as we speak. And as you can imagine, we have over 100 neighborhoods in the City of Ottawa, so it's very difficult for this team to be able to get in front of all of our communities. So this do-it-yourself toolkit is designed to be able to allow for residents and community groups to go online and find some useful tools to help them execute programs and projects in their area. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Boswell now.
Thank you. Thank you, Leanne, and thank you, Councillor Hume, for the opportunity to present our new toolkit to you today. What you're going to see today is a toolkit that has been designed to move people from awareness to action, and specifically giving them the inspiration to get involved in making creative use of public space and making their neighborhoods more livable. So on the NCO homepage, which we have up here now, you can see at a glance the different things that the NCO offers in its service delivery model to residents. We have our toolkit, we have our Better Neighborhoods program, and we have a project gallery that is featuring projects not just from Ottawa but all over the world to help people get inspired in what people are doing with creative use of public space. A little bit of an overview of the NCO and how to get in touch with us, how to subscribe to our newsletter to get engaged and get involved. This new design is kind of it's new and different for Ottawa.ca, and we've worked closely with Service Ottawa on this design and getting a kind of a storefront look and feel. It's up to date, and they'll be leveraging this design with other content updates on Ottawa.ca and other departments that are looking to create this kind of a storefront look and feel, very friendly, user-friendly for the residents. Just before we click into our toolkit, just a couple of notes on the scope of what it is. It's really focused on getting residents engaged, and what it isn't, and our external focus groups of community members who've worked on projects underscored and kind of coached us on this, is we didn't make it a how to navigate the city toolkit. It's really just full of things to help you get out there as a resident and engage with your neighbors and community groups and get things done to make your neighborhood better. So the target audience, typically initiators through our Better Neighborhoods program, our community associations, but we really wanted to broaden the scope of the audience on this project and this toolkit, and have made it, put it together in a way that we think it's going to appeal to schools and other community groups that just want to do something good in their neighborhood. Hopefully they'll work with their community associations, but not necessarily. They may decide to take on something on their own. And although it's not a how to navigate the city toolkit, one of the important things we do at the NCO is to be a point of contact for residents who want to talk to us about things they'd like to do in their neighborhood. So let's click into the toolkit, and we'll see at a glance. I'll just maybe ask Andrea to scale down a bit, because there's a lot on the, when you come to the toolkit main page. It's a modular pick and choose tool, roughly bundled in the 5 bundles of a project life cycle, everything from getting inspired, get started, make it happen, and so on. We know from our own experience, and certainly our external focus group underscored this for us, that people come to community projects at the neighborhood level with all sorts of varying capacity to take on projects. And so we made it in such a way that you can zero in if you're new and can get started, or maybe you're a seasoned person in your neighborhood who's done lots of things, and you want to just go and find that new information on how to work with social media, or maybe download a meeting checklist. You know what you want, and you can zero in and get it. And so that's how we've designed it from the user perspective. The other thing is, we know there's a lot of we knew there was a lot of great content out there, and people have been consulted and advising us on what we should include. So our approach was to find what's out there. There's a lot of good stuff on Ottawa.ca already, and we've bundled it into our toolkit to make it easier for people to find. We worked with Parks and Rec, for example, who already had a volunteer toolkit, and we had a request from them to pull their content into this toolkit so that everything's in one place, and there's much more there when people go to look for it. We featured some other toolkits as well, such as Crime Prevention Ottawa's toolkit. We linked to that, where there's specific information that is also related to what people may want to be doing in their neighborhoods. So we're going to just highlight some pages for you. We obviously don't have time to click through all of these today. We will first go to our project gallery. and this is where people can see projects from all over the place, including projects from Ottawa. Eventually, at the end of this year, we're going to be featuring our own Better Neighborhoods projects on the project gallery. We're documenting those projects, and we'll include them here for people so they can see what kind of projects are getting done through the Better Neighborhoods program. So again, creative use of public space, you can see free little libraries, all kinds of ideas here for people. Our project we have a project in Leslie Park that's a revitalization of a pathway. It's going to include murals and an installed scavenger hunt of points of interest in the neighborhood. Vanier just did a big Festival of Nations, and they're going to be doing a wayfinding project. So all of these will be great to feature here as well. So if we'll just go maybe to our collaboration page, and again, this will be really a one-stop place to go in and find some lists and contact information for who you might want to consider collaborating with on your projects. So we've got our link on ottawa.ca there to our councillors list, our community associations, and so on. And another page that I think you'll be interested in is our Find Funding page. And this one, we got great input from our community leaders that we engaged on our focus groups, and they sort of said, you know, make sure you include information on how to raise funds for the projects, of course, because it's not going to happen if you don't have funding. And we've got a link to Imagine Canada's Grant Connect, where people can actually go on and do a free webinar on how to raise funds for their projects. So this is all the kind of great stuff that we were able to put together. If you as councillors get requests from community groups about how they might fund their project, this might be a useful link for you to be able to share with them. Making an event, that takes us to all kinds of existing content bundled and packaged, Event Central on ottawa.ca. This is where we pulled in information on working with volunteers. There's links out to that as well, and training for volunteers and so on, everything you'll need to know about if you need permits and so on if you're going to be doing a community event. And it wouldn't be a very up-to-date toolkit without a good section on working with social media. So we've included information here that people can go to, sort of a how-to section, and also a whole bunch of links on this page for resources that are out there that are free and that people can access. So this is you can see there's a lot of content on this page, so lots of good things. So one more page that I wanted to show you is our Get Press page, and this will be particularly useful. People that we worked with told us we were able to work with corporate communications here, and what we've got is by request, if any group wants to contact us through the email link on the toolkit, we will get from corporate communications an up-to-date media contact list for them, and that's something I think that's going to be of great value that we're going to be able to provide. So that was nice to be able to put that in. And just going back to the home page, that's sort of my overview of some of the highlighted pages that I wanted to show you today. We do have a link on our home page to the Better Neighborhoods program, which, as you know, we have an active call for applications right now. So just a reminder that we'll be accepting applications until October the 21st, our deadline, and we encourage potential applicants, if you can let them know, they can look at the toolkit now that it's live and maybe go in, and that'll assist them in putting together their applications. So we hope you like what you see. Our goal is, as we said, to make it a kind of toolkit that will really move neighborhood groups from awareness and inspiration to action and doing something to make do something creative with public space in their neighborhoods. And we appreciate any feedback you might have. You can always reach us through neighborhoods@ottawa.ca by clicking on our toolkit and getting directly to us there. We'll be starting an awareness campaign rolling out later today, and we encourage you, if you can, to spread the word as well. That's it. So I think if there's any questions, we'd be happy to entertain questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A few questions for you. Thank you for the presentation. Can you tell me if we've done any cost-benefit analysis on this? What's the program going to cost us to have this department set up versus what the benefits?
Through the chair, that's a very interesting question. This program has been in operation now for 2 years, and at the end of 2014, we'll be doing a full program evaluation to assess the successes, and definitely we'll be looking at a cost benefit, and we'll be bringing forward for 2015 any future recommendations on going forward.
For 2015, okay. And I noticed on the funding page, you didn't have anything about ideas for fundraising. It was just how they could get money from the city. Now, in the past, when I was involved in renewing parks and everything, we would do the fundraising activities for that and maybe use like a minor capital grant program or something. But you don't have any of that in there. That's all just come to us and we'll give you the money. And as you know, most people are going to be told no because we just don't have the funding. So is there a suggestion to put something in there, a link to fundraising ideas that maybe have worked well in other areas towards things like this?
Right. So we do have that information in a couple of places. We weren't able to show all of the pages this morning just for time constraints. We do have a link on our Get Inspired to local programs and events, so that refers to some of the minor, Andrea will just show it up here, some of the programs that exist already that people can apply to, and that's quite comprehensive. Things like Awesome Ottawa that are outside of the city that are available and accessible to neighborhood groups. On the Find Funding page, the main link is to an external website, Imagine Canada's Grant Connect. So it's actually not city funding, although we do have a link to the city funding page that's on ottawa.ca as well. And there is a free webinar that people can sign up for through that not-for-profit about how to raise funds.
And that's right on the...
It is on there, yes, on the Find Funding, yeah. And we link to all of these other places as well. We are going to be very interested in the feedback we get in terms of other sources that our neighborhood leaders are going to tell us that we should include. So this is what we started with, but it's going to be refreshed ongoing.
So we'll
whatever is timely, whatever is popular, we'll make sure it gets up there. So by all means, if people know of additional content, we'd be happy to get that.
Great. Now, the other question I have for you is I've had one of these applications come forward to me where a group wanted to do something in a park, and when we went to the meeting to talk about it, there had been no looking at logistics, like that, the thing couldn't go ahead because there was no access to power or night lighting, any of that. Should we not be, if we're going to go ahead with something like this, should we not be at least doing a cursory review of these applications before we start getting everybody involved in it?
Through the chair, this is certainly our first year, and it's been an interesting experiment. And definitely, when we do the intake process, we do a bit of a high-level cursory review. But certainly, lessons that we've learned this year, we will have a little bit more of a fulsome exercise around that. The challenge is, part of the exercise really is to work with the community to assess their needs. Often with the applications, it may be one or two people that get together and decide that this might be great for the community. What our process does is ensures that, in fact, the idea for the project is supported largely within that neighborhood. So part of our process is to assess the needs. And then our next step is then to assess, is this doable? So there is sometimes a bit of a back and forth and an iterative process to really land on ultimately what that project is going to be. And that is built into the program. That is part of the process. But certainly your point is well taken in terms of the more we can do up front to assess the feasibility, the better.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anyone else who has questions for the Neighborhood Connections Office? No? Thank you very much for your presentation. Okay, and so we're going to receive this. Is it received? Received, okay. Now, I understand that if we go back, members of committee, let me hold on here to item number 11, that Mr. Laundrie, Mr. Holtzman, and Mr. Koshman have resolved their respective issues, at least with respect to the zoning. We haven't resolved the issue on Coronation, which is an ongoing issue in the pedestrian connection from Coronation to the train yards. But insomuch as the zoning is dealt with, Mr. Laundrie, do you still have concerns with respect to the zoning?
No, I don't have any concerns.
Okay.
Except what I put in writing previously for items.
No, perfect. And so you don't need to speak to the committee then? You're satisfied?
No, because the city will follow up with the representatives of the train yard and
Okay. Perfect. And Mr. Holtzman, Mr. Koshman, you're satisfied? You don't need to speak to the committee? Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. Gentlemen, we do have a motion that needs to be dealt with, which is a technical amendment that rewrites, there are a number of subclause repetitions, and we're cleaning that up. So is that item carried? Carried. And is the item as amended carried? Carried. Okay, thank you very much to the both of you. Okay, good. On to item now number 10. Now you can leave, Councillor. That's right. Item number 10, official plan and zoning, Montreal Road District Secondary Plan. That's it.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I'd like to start off just by pointing out that we do have some technical help here with simultaneous translation. If anyone would like to, they can grab one for that. This is a project that started back in December, and it was something that came out of the Planning Summit. It started at looking at the former City of Vanier site-specific policies that are in the official plan, and it ended up being extended out into Ward 13 to St. Laurent Boulevard as part of the project. And in this area, there hasn't been intensification like we've seen in other areas, despite the fact that it's pretty much the same distance from downtown from a lot of other neighborhoods that have seen a lot of intensification and redevelopment projects. And that meant that we could update the policies to the current planning framework to basically get ahead of any sort of major intensification. So the goal of the project was really to build upon the good elements that existed in the site-specific policies in the OP and to eliminate the inconsistencies that we see that occurred with the OP and with the zoning. Sorry, go ahead.
Monsieur le Président, le service d'urbanisme a le plaisir de vous présenter aujourd'hui une mise à jour des politiques pour Vanier. Une mise à jour rendue nécessaire par le passage du temps, mais aussi par besoin d'accompagner un souffle de renouveau dans ce quartier. Un quartier, en fait, qui est si proche du centre-ville qu'il est déjà, en fait, vu par plusieurs comme en faisant partie. À l'époque où se sont écrites les politiques que nous remplaçons aujourd'hui, Vanier était une municipalité distincte, dont les priorités d'aménagement étaient différentes de celles d'aujourd'hui. À l'époque, la ville de Vanier misait presque uniquement sur l'emploi et sur un commerce de détail de style suburbain, donc des grandes surfaces, des grands stationnements, se résignant aux tendances lourdes de l'époque qui voyaient les gens fuir la ville vers la banlieue. Alors qu'aujourd'hui, nous assistons à un retour des gens vers les quartiers de ville où on se retrouve à proximité du centre, mais aussi à proximité des rues commerciales, conviviales de quartier. Les gens retrouvent plaisir à vivre à pied, à profiter des services de proximité et d'habiter l'espace public. Le plan que nous vous présentons aujourd'hui maintient l'emphase sur l'emploi, mais mise donc sur le repeuplement de Vanier par ses artères commerciales de quartier et mise aussi sur la qualité de l'espace public, les trottoirs, les places, les espaces verts. Ma collègue Melanie Knight va vous en présenter les détails et j'inviterai tout le monde à se munir de vos casques d'écoute pour la traduction simultanée. Merci.
Thank you. So the study area for the project started off with the area formerly known in the former downtown area of Vanier, from North River Road out to Ducharme, and then it was expanded out to Saint Laurent Boulevard, and for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that Montreal Road is designated a traditional main street from North River Road all the way out to Saint Laurent Boulevard. From a land use perspective, it's a seamless street all the way from North River Road to Saint Laurent Boulevard, so there was no sort of discernible spot to stop the study area. In addition to that, when we went out to the community to introduce the project, there was a request to extend it all the way out to Saint Laurent Boulevard, partially from the BIA and partially from the community, who thought that there was also a lot of opportunities for intensification out towards Saint Laurent Boulevard and areas where things, redevelopment opportunities could happen. So the planning framework that we've got today are the traditional main streets of Montreal Road and MacArthur Avenue. They've been designated those streets in the city's official plan. The current site-specific policies don't really reflect that traditional main street designation. In addition to that, the Vanier Parkway is designated a scenic entry route, and Montreal Road and the Vanier Parkway are primary cycling routes as well. So the current policies shown on the map up here separate the area of the former downtown area of Vanier in 3 different sectors: the west sector, which is from North River Road to the Vanier Parkway, the central sector, which is shown in purple, and then the east sector, which is shown in yellow. The site-specific policies were carried over from the former City of Vanier's official plan after amalgamation. However, they were never updated to reflect the current policy framework that exists today. In addition to that, the policies show 3 different sectors, but there's no real policies for the east sector in the site-specific policies currently. So some of the good elements of the site-specific policies that were built upon in this new plan is that it separates the area into sectors, which is helpful because each sector has different qualities to it. It encourages public open spaces for social and cultural functions. It requires adequate buffering between tall buildings and low-rise residential uses. It reduces vehicular access points, specifically on Montreal Road and MacArthur Avenue, and it identifies the site at Montreal Road and North River Road as a gateway to the area. Some of the current policies that are problematic with our current planning framework is that the policies actually limit residential uses and mixed-use buildings to only 1/3 of the building. It encourages big blocks development and an employment center in the west sector, requiring new commercial developments of a minimum of 10,000 square meters, which is about 100,000 square feet. It discourages land severances, and it states that residential uses are not considered to be compatible with non-residential uses. The current zoning, the TM3 and the TM4 zones are specific to the former City of Vanier, so the area, the TM3 and TM4 zones don't exist anywhere else in the city. That's actually a good thing, because any tweaks that we make to those zones means that it won't be making any changes to anywhere else in the city. The traditional Main Street and the general Main Street zones do enter into the stable low-rise areas north and south of Montreal Road, and that has created some issues with legal nonconforming situations, because the TM and the GM zones have entered into those stable low-rise areas within at least a block or 2 north and south of Montreal Road, and most of those areas have been, like I said, stable low-rise areas, and so that creates some non-conforming situations. Some of the lots are actually split zoned, And the heights along Montreal Road is probably the most problematic because they're not consistent. So they range from height limits from 16 meters to 42 meters, and in many cases, a property that's zoned for 16 meters is right beside a property that's zoned for 42 meters. So there's no transitioning in building heights with the zoning. So through the course of the study, we've come up with a secondary plan boundary. As you can see on the map on the screen, it's quite skinnier compared to what the original site-specific policies boundary is. We've made it quite a bit sleeker along Montreal Road and MacArthur Avenue, and you can see it's also extended out to Saint Laurent Boulevard. We have done the same thing as the existing policies do right now, where we've separated them into sectors. So we have the west sector in purple, the central sector in blue, and the east sector in yellow. And we've also identified 4 major intersections as part of the study, and these are intersections where cycling and pedestrian crossings are really not adequate at all, and the policies speak to improving these intersections as time goes on through city projects and also through development projects adjacent to the intersections. We've also identified 2 gateway sites, the first one being what we call the West Gateway, which is at the corner of North River Road and Montreal Road, and the second one is the East Gateway, which is at the corner of Montreal Road and Saint Laurent Boulevard. So in terms of what the new secondary plan proposes, we've got district-wide policies, and then we've got site-specific policies for each sector. So the district-wide policies encourage streetscaping and street trees, require 5-meter sidewalks along Montreal Road and MacArthur Avenue, encourage transit connections and better transit stop facilities, and improvements to cycling facilities. The gateways are supposed to be distinctly different than the other lots within the district. The maximum building height along the traditional main streets is 6 stories. Lots on a traditional main street that have greater depth and area could increase their building height up to 7 stories if specific criteria are met. And then there are a number of larger lots along Montreal Road and MacArthur Avenue that are actually over half a hectare in size, and those could increase up to 9 stories if specific criteria are met. In terms of the major intersections that I mentioned, it does say that future design of these intersections will prioritize the pedestrian and the cyclist and improve connections to transit stops, as well as, where possible, to reduce pedestrian crossing distances at these intersections. So the west sector has specific policies. It identifies the area as an entryway to the district. It also identifies the gateway site, the interior of the west sector, which is seen in yellow on the screen. So the gateway site requires a master concept plan for the site, requires significant contributions to the public realm. It does require that a maximum of 6 stories building height along Montreal Road and MacArthur Avenue, but it also permits high-rise buildings up to 28 stories. It also has specific design and facade requirements for buildings in terms of windows and doors facing the streets, and it has maximum floor plate sizes and minimum separation distances for high-rise buildings. The west sector also talks about North River Road and MacArthur Avenue, again to improve cycling and pedestrian connections, making sure buildings have direct access to the street, as well as facade and building design criteria. In terms of the built form, lots on a traditional main street in the west and east sectors that are greater than 1 hectare could increase their building heights up to 14 stories if specific criteria are met. Lots within the west sector that have 100 meters of frontage on the Vanier Parkway could also increase their height up to 18 stories if specific criteria are met. For the interior of the west sector, there's a number of smaller streets within the interior of the west sector, and the goal there is to maintain existing low-rise built form along Palace Street specifically. Palace Street is a very narrow right-of-way, approximately 8 to 9 meters wide, and it currently has a number of small single detached houses that you can see on the pictures up here. And so the very narrow right-of-way really restricts the amount of development that could occur along Palace Street in terms of building height. You don't want a really tall building overpowering a very narrow street. So it does require that a maximum of 4 stories along Palace Street be permitted, but it does recognize that if a number of lots are consolidated along Palace Street, you could have a built form along 4 stories along Palace Street with stepping back to higher heights. It also permits a mix of uses that are compatible with non-residential uses, because Palace Street is so close to Montreal Road. It does have the ability, and currently is already transitioning into a more mixed-use street. For the central sector, this is the historic downtown core for the former city of Vanier. The scale and intensity of the development in this sector is to be less than the other 2 sectors that we see. So the Vanier Parkway in the central sector, the policies require that there's increased pedestrian access to the parkway from new developments, also with a policy to retain as much as existing vegetation as possible, and also the inclusion of public art that could reflect the historic route of the Vanier Parkway or the history of the former city of Vanier. Along Montreal Road in the central sector, building and site design, streets and streetscaping elements are required that will reflect the history of the French Quarter. And then Merrier Street, which is a unique street, somewhat similar to Palace Street in the sense that it's evolved into a mix of residential uses. The zoning's been changed to permit a few compatible non-residential uses on that street. And for the east sector, this is really the entryway to the district from the east. It does contain a number of important institutional uses, the Notre Dame Cemetery to the north on Montreal Road, Les Filles de la Sagesse, which is directly west of the Gateway site, and there's a number of other larger sites in the area. It also backs on to existing low-rise residential uses, so that's an important element too. In terms of the built form in the east sector, again, it's the same policy that we see in the west sector. If you've got a property that's greater than 1 hectare, building heights could increase up to 14 stories, again, if specific criteria can be met. And then for the east sector gateway, there is the same requirement for master concept plan and contributions to the public realm, and the maximum 6 stories along Montreal Road that we see in the other gateway site. We've allowed for a high-rise buildings up to 20 stories, and it's less than the other gateway site because of the surrounding low-rise residential uses and the adjacent institutional uses that are important. Again, maximum floor plates and minimum separation distances between buildings and design and facade requirements. There's also specific criteria built into the policies that require setbacks and transitioning in building height to nearby low-rise uses, and it also restricts access from the local street, Morin Street, which is immediately south of the gateway site. In terms of implementing this plan and how that's going to bring forward in the future, we've updated the zoning to reflect these new secondary plan policies. There's, of course, the use of Section 37 to secure funds for improvements that are mentioned in the secondary plan. And through the development process, streetscaping, street furniture, and design features such as public art are also things that can be implemented. And then over time, as development occurs along Montreal Road, sidewalks and boulevards will be increased to 5 meters, and it will become a more pedestrian-friendly environment. And then improvements to cycling will be made as per the Transportation Master Plan. So in terms of the updates to the zoning, part of the update was to delete the TM4 zone. It was used in the former city of Vanier for only a small number of lots. So those lots have been rezoned to TM3, but the site-specific provisions that you find in the TM4 zone have been carried over to those lots. So fundamentally, the zoning really hasn't changed on those lots. It's really just the zoning subzone that has changed for them. We've corrected split zone lots. In some cases, zones have actually changed this split zone, the lots right in between right through buildings, actually. So we've corrected those ones that we've found. We've rezoned some of the properties that were previously zoned traditional Main Street to an R4 zone, which is reflective of the rest of the residential area north and south of Montreal Road. And then the zoning also addresses the unique low-rise areas of the interior of the west sector along Palace Street and Merier Street. Any questions?
We'll get to question members of the committee. If I understand, and I read the report, we gave some property owners some pretty interesting zoning, which created on the single-family home and the split lots. So somebody must have upzoned them at that time, and now we're downzoning them. Or I guess downzoning is a bad terminology. We're more right-sizing the zoning to what to more reflect the stable, single, low-rise neighborhood. That's correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so how are we handling then? So that's how we're solving the nonconformity issue, right? So is there a risk that someone who enjoyed that zoning thought it would be a good thing to come back and say, no, I want that back?
That's definitely a possibility.
I guess, is there a policy rationale for them to do that? And I guess that goes back to, was there a policy rationale in the first place to extend that higher order zoning onto those sites?
Well, typically on traditional main streets, you can think of all the ones that we have in the city. In many cases, the traditional Main Street zoning does sort of turn around the corner on side streets and allow for, a little bit of that mixed use to go down the side streets where it's appropriate. In these cases, the traditional Main Street zoning was going at least a block or two in to the residential areas. And in looking at the history of these properties, they have been residential properties from the very beginning.
Right.
So there wasn't really any sort of rationale why these sort of blocks and blocks north and south of Montreal Road were ever zoned traditional Main Street, because nothing ever really happened, and it doesn't really meet that idea of kind of turning the corner and giving a little bit of variety on the corners.
So I guess we believe that we have a strong, an overwhelming public policy stance to be able to say, no, that zoning's got to come off there.
That's right. And the streets that we did recognize that are a little bit unique is Merier and Palace.
Right.
And those two are unique streets. And Alain's group is starting to do a project where they'll be looking at some sort of streets like that and how they could be maybe included in zoning in the future. So they'll definitely be looked at for sure.
Okay. The site-specific policy, I was amused when it encourages employment center and big box commercial development. It's kind of a unique set of zoning criteria, 30 seconds from downtown. The new policies, although promoting employment and that mixed use, sort of aren't encouraging the big box, big parking lot stuff.
That's right. Those policies were not included in this new plan.
Perfect. Okay. Okay. Is there any other questions for staff? Oh, Councillor, welcome. Okay, we're gonna get to the public. And I'm hoping you filled in a request to speak form or you registered in advance, but we'll get to you. This is just for members of council. So, Councillor Clark.
Well, it was extended to Montreal Road, but I don't know why it wasn't extended to, say, Blair Road or Orleans Boulevard or some other place when the object was to update the zoning in Vanier. And I understand it was kind of nice, convenient, and tidy, but the reality is that it could have been put further east if you wanted to. The point is that the BIA, as far as I can tell, does not extend that far, and won't. You understand that? Yes. Well, from the thing there, it wasn't very accurate. And the other thing that came up, you talked about buffering the adjacent communities. What do you mean by that?
Sorry, let's get to your first program. Councillor, do you have a concern with the boundaries of the secondary plan?
Well, yeah, I do. I did before it started, and I was suitably ignored. But that's not the point. The point is that if you're going to use it and say it's the Vanier BIA, I have a problem with that.
The secondary plan boundaries weren't based on the BIA boundaries. It was just when we did the public consultation, the request was from the BIA as well as from members of the community that it be extended out to St. Laurent Boulevard. And then from a policy perspective, because Montreal Road is a traditional main street from North River Road to St. Laurent Boulevard and then changes to an arterial main street after that, there was a policy sort of basis that it should be looked at the entire strip of Montreal Road.
Montreal Road runs to the other side of Orleans,
Right.
by the way, just for your information.
No, but what she's saying is that right now, the land use designations to the west of Montreal Road were traditional Main Street, and to the east of St. Laurent Boulevard are arterial Main Street. So rather than leave a chunk of traditional Main Street between Montreal Road or between St. Laurent Boulevard and some other Descharmes, leave that alone, they decided to include all of the traditional Main Street so that there was a consistent application of the new policies on all of the areas that are traditional Main Street along Montreal Road. Am I correct in that?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So I know that the difference you're trying to make, and I was going to wonder why I didn't go over and take into account some of those areas along Montreal Road that you could see. What's the used car lot that's on Montreal Road?
Oh, and Shoppers Drug Mart and Farm Boy. And
well, I wouldn't go that far, Councillor, but
you want a list of them? I can probably recite one. But the issue is not so much that somebody's picked a point, but that the original object, which was on the first slide, was to update the Vanier Centertown zoning, and we included this in it, but it's not in Vanier. Similarly, we could have included, like I said, you can go all the way over to Cummings if you want, because it's all the same kind of stuff. But more to the point, there are specific things that were said in this report, like buffering, and I'd like to know what the intent would be, because if the words don't have any definition, then I don't know whether we can use them.
The intent of buffering and the terms like adequate setbacks and building height transitions are all terms that we use in the official plan policies, and then they're implemented through site-specific zoning bylaw amendments and through the site plan process. So it's difficult to be very prescriptive in the official plan policies in terms of specific buffering, because then if somebody comes up with a different idea that what wasn't thought of in the secondary plan policies, they're faced with an official plan amendment for something that might be a very minor technicality. So that's why we use sort of general terms like buffering and adequate setbacks and building height transitions.
so can you give them an example?
If I were a resident and counting on the word buffering to protect me, I should not do that. Is that what you're saying?
No, I think what she's saying is that although those are general terminologies, it will be if we're requiring buffering and setbacks and transition heights, those all need to find their way into the zoning bylaw and that's where the protections would exist. Is that?
Yes, that's correct. So buffering, like the distance between, a higher intensity use and a lower intensity use, is something that we deal with at the zoning stage. Most of the zoning was updated for this, except for those really complicated sites like the gateway sites. They're extremely complicated, so they're difficult to place specific zoning provisions on them, because there's a lot that could happen on these properties. They're very, very large properties, and the massive developments could happen on them. So in terms of density, so it really is not something that we can do ahead of time.
So give us an example, the Belil site, right, which is your gateway. I'm assuming it's your gateway site under the 4, right?
That's correct. It's
Yeah,
the
so
East Gateway.
it abuts an ecclesiastical use, does it not?
Yes, that's
Right.
correct.
So how do our policies provide a protection or a transition from that very intensive use that would go on at the Belle-Île site to protect or enhance the ecclesiastical site?
So the policies provide different criteria that have to be met through the zoning process. So the policies provide that overall evaluation tool for us, all of us, to use when we have an application in. So it talks about building height transitions, which is the requirement is that the building height transition must begin at the maximum building heights of adjacent zones. So if the adjacent zone permits 18 meters, then that's where the building height transition has to begin on this gateway site. It also requires the applicant to prove that the setbacks and the distances from the properties are reduce shadowing and overlook, and those types of things that we deal with through the zoning amendment process. And then it provides those requirements for the higher rise buildings to have minimum separation distances and maximum floor plates, so we don't get very large buildings. We get those point towers that we're all looking for that provide that type of air circulation and reduce the shadowing impacts on properties.
Now, I presume that if we use traditional Main Street and say nothing more than 6 stories, like we did on Beechwood, so far there's been 2 new developments, neither one of them is anywhere close to 6 stories. They're above it. And, well, I think the bloom is off the condo rows at the moment. I think that is the 6 stories designed to create Section 37 opportunities?
Well, the policies say that the 6 stories is required along Montreal Road and MacArthur Avenue. So if a proposal had a large site where taller buildings could be placed, there is a requirement that the podium of those buildings has to be 6 stories. So the remainder of the site could be taller, and high-rise buildings could be built, but the building form that you see along the traditional Main Street would be 6 stories. On the bigger sites, yes, Section 37 would be probably something that would be definitely eligible for. On very, very small sites that we see on the tiny traditional Main Streets, obviously not. So.
Well, actually, you could get Section 37 on smaller sites too, but that's for another day. My concern is that I saw in this report 14 stories, 20 stories, and with a limitation of 6 stories. Now, how are we going to square that if people read the 6 stories and all of a sudden you're saying up to 20 stories? Is 6 stories the base? And then we talk about it from there, or what is going on here, just so we're all clear on this?
Yes, so 6 stories would be the base of the building. Again, it'd be like fronting onto Montreal Road, a podium-style building that you would see, and then you could step back and do higher buildings behind it.
And you mentioned mixed commercial residential.
Yes.
I presume that means ground floor retail?
Yes, the traditional Main Street zoning already has requirements for ground floor uses, retail uses and things like that, so that would be part of the implementation of that.
And so that's retail versus commercial. What about offices and things like that? Does that, if there's an office, you're encouraging office uses, i.e. something like the one that's next door to Saint-Laurent Shopping Center down the other end?
Office uses would also be permitted, are also permitted in the TM3 zones, so there wouldn't be any problem with having office uses.
So that all of this is at the policy level and we're not getting into the nitty-gritty?
Yes, the traditional Main Street designation in the official plan lays out the different uses that are permitted, and then the zoning looks at it on a site-specific basis. But the TM...
Only on the gateway sites, right? We're zoning all of the other sites.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes some sense, even if I didn't agree with including one gateway site. The point is that that when we start to discuss this, I believe that the detail gets discussed at site plan, and it's gotten mishmashed in this process so far, and I just want to make sure that's clear.
Okay. Okay.
Is that correct?
That's clear, yes.
You agree, Elaine?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Fleury, and then Councillor Caudry.
Yes, a couple of questions. I'll follow up with Councillor Clark's last statement or last comment. If the site wasn't included in the zone, would it be at risk of higher density or less strategic redevelopment?
If these sites were not included in the secondary plan, then it would be, you would look to the official plan, general official plan policies for any sort of development criteria. And so there, especially with the gateway sites, there's no criteria about master concept plans and things like that, contributions to the public realm and things like that. So yes, it would be up to the applicant to propose whatever they would like.
So in terms of creating a corridor, a more cohesive corridor, it does make sense to extend to Montreal Road, but I do understand Councillor Clark's comment. A couple of questions related to the key intersections. So you highlighted 4 intersections that are problematic. We've talked about them often from the planning department, but also on the transportation side. How will these be reviewed? So I get that you've presented them in conceptual aspects. They make sense for a little, some modifications, but how would they get implemented? Would they come through redevelopment, or is that a strategic initiative from traffic?
The implementation of the changes to the major intersections would be two-pronged. One would be if the city initiated any sort of redesign of any of these intersections, then we would have regard for our own policies to improve them. And then if applications were made, development applications were made adjacent to these intersections, then through that process we would look at transportation studies to determine what sort of improvements need to be made to those intersections, and they could be improvements could be gained through that process as well. So two-pronged approach.
Okay, and now I'm well aware that one of the gateway sites, the one further west, an application was submitted. How does it fit into this report?
It's my understanding that first we worked closely with a number of property owners, the owners of that property being one of them, and initially they were faced with an official plan amendment because of the existing site-specific policies, and it's specifically that restriction of the 30% of the building, a maximum of 30% of the building could only be residential. So they were faced with that official plan amendment if they were to apply anytime before the secondary plan deleted that provision. And in meeting with them and talking to them about these policies, they seemed to be very supportive of them. They had no objections to any of the policies, anything that they had. And in fact, everything that we put into the policies, they were doing anyways.
So just to clarify, too, you described the 30% maximum residential for the corridor, not site-specific. The idea here is ground floor commercial with an opportunity to continue the commercial a bit, but we encourage residential for other floors. Is that kind of the basics?
Yep, the basis would fall to the traditional Main Street designation in the official plan, which definitely supports a mix of uses, so a combination of commercial and residential, but definitely mixing those uses together for sure.
And just as a wrap-up to your previous comment around the Marriott corridor, so we want to tie in the Montreal Road corridor with the Beechwood, and one of the key, Vanier Parkway is an obvious one, but Marier seems to be more of a community street. How do we encourage the renewal of that corridor through, commercial, these little houses becoming a little more friendly to commercial, like barbershops or other, that might tie in the two streets? You mentioned that Alain's group might be looking into it, but can you maybe explain a bit more?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor, we have in our work plan for the zoning consistency group, one of the items which actually we're undertaking in a month or two is a look at local commercial, neighborhood commercial corridors and uses, which would include consideration of streets that are pedestrian connections between major points, major destinations such as main streets. And Mary has been flagged many, many times through the Vanier Forum that the NCO conducted last November, through discussions throughout the process of the secondary plan, and by the Community Association and the BIA as a corridor that would merit a consideration for that type of zoning approach. So stay tuned. This is a process that our group will be initiating over the next month and a half.
Parfait. Merci.
Okay. Councillor Kadri.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And my question is related to the comment just made by Ms. Knight about the traditional Main Street zoning. You mentioned that the current traditional Main Street zoning is 6 stories height. And then you mentioned the fact that it's only for the base being 6 story. The rest of the building could be taller. Is that application available or applied to all traditional Main Streets in the city?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Well, the traditional Main Street designation in the official plan has policies that do allow greater building heights depending on certain circumstances. For this specific secondary plan, these policies would be specific to this area only, but it does recognize that along this traditional Main Street, there are many, many large lots, not that you would typically find in other traditional Main Streets like maybe Bank Street or Wellington Street, but very, very large lots that actually could accommodate quite a bit of density, and that's why we created these thresholds, if you will, about building heights, because the recognition is that, yes, the traditional Main Street is, in its core, should be maximum 6 stories, but if the property is very big and you could provide step backs, you could have greater building height behind that 6 stories. So the intent of the traditional Main Street is still maintained by having that 6-story maximum building height, but then greater building heights would be further back, so it wouldn't be as noticeable from the traditional Main Street.
Okay, so the definition of appropriate site, is that defined in the traditional Main Street in terms of it has to be certain size before you can implement that 6-story or higher designation?
Yes, in the secondary plan that we've got on the table today, it definitely has thresholds for each individual height. So there's thresholds for if you could do 7 stories, and this is lot area and size configuration for 7 stories, and then for 9 stories and further, 14 and then 18. So there's definitely size thresholds in the secondary plan policies that are very specific to this area. In the general traditional Main Street policies, there's specific criteria, but I don't believe that they're based on lot size. I'm sorry, I can't remember them off the top of my head, but some of them are corner sites and sites that can accommodate greater heights. But the official plan policies, the general policies for traditional Main Street, aren't as specific as what this secondary plan is in terms of allowing for greater building heights.
Thank you for that, Ms. Knight. And Mr. Chair, the reason why I'm asking those questions is obviously Stittsville Main Street is going through a community design plan based on its traditional Main Street zoning. So I just want to clarify that, that zoning that is referred to today in here in this CDP does not apply across the city in terms of...
It may be quite different. CDPs are done to reflect the unique characteristics of the neighborhoods in which they are conducted. May provide higher heights, but may not, right?
Okay, I just want to put that on the record.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for staff? Okay, we've got a number of delegations. We'll start with Carol LaRose. If you'd like to come forward. And if you want to take the chair right over here. There you go.
Thank you. I'm quite new at this, and I'm quite excited to be here because I live right behind where the sisters are on the west side, so I would definitely be affected by it. But I do want you to know that I love this city. I actually lived on Palace 50 years ago. I want to see good things happen. I'm not here to look at or to talk to you about the height or the changes. I'm happy to see change happening in my city. However, I do want to address what's being brought out as buffering. It's my new term. It wasn't when I started, but it is now. I'd like to talk to you about the impact of noise pollution as an environmental health issue, something that I think that the city is not quite up to date about. The impact of noise on how this is going to affect the rest of the residents. I'm just actually going to read what is written by Dr. Wayne Cornell, who's an epidemiologist, and wrote to the Sisters of the Celle de la Sagesse to talk to them about what was affecting us on College Street. And you can see how far back we are and how big there is no buffer back there. And also across the street, there's a large building. It's an apartment building. And if we're talking about getting the Belil site having larger and high and greater heights behind the 6 stories, it's definitely going to impact that area. But on the whole, I'd like to talk to you about environmental health and noise pollution, because noise pollution really is the new smoking issue in our city. Science is moving quickly, and the standards and norms and city bylaws have not always kept up to date to the research evidence. At the same time, standards of practice as set out by organizations such as the American National Standards Institute create a level for due diligence for workplaces and institutions. There's a growing body of evidence reported by national institutions of health that discuss the environmental health journals about the negative health impacts of low frequency. And that's up to 100 HS on selected psychological parameters. And sound only becomes noise when it's become an undesirable physiological or psychological effect on people. However, machinery that moves air right now has a special interest because it usually creates noise with a large component of low frequencies, which is something that the city is not looking at. In our bylaws, all we look at are the higher level, but low frequency is an issue that we really need to look at because it will affect the city, and in the new planning, it also affects it on levels such as it's a common background noise, such as environmental emissions, such as road vehicles, industrial machinery, air movement machinery, including wind turbines, compressors, indoor ventilation, and air conditioning. So these are low-frequency issues that the city now is not looking at. And these are issues that I believe will be affecting not just this corridor, but all of the city, and how that's affecting our population. Because this population now we're growing older. We're a larger community now, and we're affected by the impact of noise. And World Health Organization is one of the bodies which recognizes a special place of low-frequency noise as an environmental issue. Health Canada, you don't have me here. Health Canada, more than a decade ago, labeled noise as a real and present danger. Noise is the invisible pollutant, and it's been blamed from everything from hypertension and learning difficulties to suicide. And I'd really like the city to look at the impact of noise. And when we say buffering, I don't know what that means. I don't think that the city is looking at how that impacts the residents, and especially our aging population, because we're all growing older. We've got more people over the age of 65 now than we have anyone under the age of 65. So I'd like you to really consider, as you're moving forward on this, the impact of noise, and specifically changing the bylaw to include low-frequency noise, not just the noise levels that we have now. And I'd like you to look at that in the planning and seeing how those buffers will actually impact the rest of the residents.
Okay.
I have a number of sites, scientific sites that I'd like to be able to share with you if you would like to look at those, because I think we need to look at due diligence in the city's planning on noise pollution.
Okay. You can provide those to us, and we'll make sure that they're forwarded to. We don't craft those noise bylaws at this committee.
I understand you don't.
But we'll make sure that they are forwarded to the Community Protective Services Committee for their consideration. I just want to make sure that I understand correctly. And I don't have my map up, but you back onto the Sisters property.
I do.
Right. So the definition, and you abut the Belil property, which is a gateway site.
Yes.
So what if I understand the way we're doing this correctly, is the Belil site's not going to be zoned. It has policies that govern its future development.
Sure.
And one of those policies is to provide adequate buffering and setbacks and transitions, right? So when that site actually comes forward for development and there's something concrete there, you would then be engaged and said, okay, in this specific instance, this is what buffering means. It means, you know, you're 20 meters away, there's no overlook, the air handling equipment is handled in such a way. And that's because and we're doing that very specifically so that we can, on those bigger sites, which higher heights, be quite specific in addressing how buffering, setbacks, and those type of matters are dealt with on those bigger sites. So there's more, I guess, to come for you on that. I don't know, though, what we're proposing for the sister site, if anything.
Mr. Chair, in terms of the sister site, they would fall under the criteria to be able to increase their building height up to 14 stories. They would meet that threshold. Again, with the same criteria that you've mentioned with adequate buffering and things like that. And,
so what does this policy give them as of right?
We haven't rezoned their property or anything like that, but as of right, it would give them 14 stories.
But we're not rezoning their property?
No, we are not, because it's
because it's a big site.
And it's a stable institutional site.
Right. So for your other one, so if the sister site were in the future to come up for development, not that we want or promoting that, the definition of setbacks and buffering would be determined at that time. So the zoning that exists on the site that allows the sisters to exist stays exactly the way it is. No changes are proposed at this point in time.
I'm understanding that.
Okay.
I'm clear on that. But really what I'm trying to do is use that as an example.
Sure.
And I'm using the Belil site, the potential Belil site, as an example. But what I really want you to do is, in your planning, to consider the impact of environmental noise.
Right.
And because right now buffering is just it's a key word. We're not looking at how that really does impact the rest of the city, our planning. It's really not an issue that the city looks at. And so I think that we have an opportunity, as this is being moved forward, to look at that, because it will impact on us,
right.
All of us. So
Okay.
that's why I'm here. Is I'd like to talk to you about that. I'd like you to look at that, and I'd like you to consider it. So when I say low frequency, I'm talking about many issues. It's not just a catch-all. It's about, as I said, machinery.
Mm-hmm.
So it's what kind of buffering will be going on when we're making new plans in our city, and how that will impact all of the citizens.
Right.
How is that going to impact it? Right now, low frequency is something that is not looked at, and yet it's a very potential hazard on the impact of the health, especially of our aging population. And I say that because the scientific proof is that it is very much an issue, just as smoking was. It impacts our health.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Ms. LaRose? No. Thank you for your presentation. If you have those specific citations, if you'd give them to the clerk, we'll make sure that they get to our noise bylaw people. So, in addition to the planning group.
Well, I'd like you all to look at it, and if I may, I'll send it to you.
We will.
Not just our bylaw, but I want you to be aware of the impact of environmental health. And I think it's due diligence. The city's behind, and it's time to move forward.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. Mr.
Thank you.
Marcel Prévost. I'm sorry. You're fine? Okay. The next speaker is Mike Balthus. If you'd like to come up.
Good morning. So I'm here this morning as President of the Vanier Community Association to highlight a number of our comments presented earlier to you in a memo from Chris Penton, who is the chair of our Sustainable Development Committee. Chris was unfortunately, due to a work commitment, unable to be here today. So I think I just want to start by saying that we are grateful for efforts to update the current site-specific policy for Vanier. We see this as positive for Vanier's renewal, ensuring that zoning for this corridor is better aligned with our vision of Vanier today. That is a complete neighborhood set within a larger city with several traditional main streets that actually feel like traditional main streets with their mixed uses. And I'll say now, to ensure that I have the time, that we do wish to commend staff on developing the plan, who since launching the project in January have met with us on several occasions while becoming available to welcome comments and respond to questions. So thank you for that. Our comments this morning are really oriented now to implementation with some challenges looking forward. And they're reflective of several board discussions along with feedback that we received from members after sharing a draft of this submission with our membership in early September. So this plan is really quite comprehensive. It addresses a lot, and I just want to speak to a few themes. So with regards to overall zoning, with Montreal Road currently designated as a traditional main street, again, we believe that this update aims to encourage development to help the street actually be a traditional main street. We see in this plan a sensitivity to areas where economic investment and reinvestment would be beneficial, while also protecting heritage streetscapes in areas such as around Palace and even Marier, as already discussed. We do ask for ample notice of proposed changes to any zoning as set out. We recognize that some of the importance of updating this plan, like other neighborhood plans, was identified at the April 2012 Planning Summit, where an emphasis on certainty and predictability vis-a-vis new development was prioritized. So we look forward to this, but we do have this nagging fear around spot rezonings and so on, and we just simply ask for ample notice if and when this occurs. With regards to gateways, the maximum heights plan for the two gateways, we do seek assurances that the heights will neither change when a buyer or a developer is introduced, nor that the heights will creep further into nearby properties. We are, by and large, very supportive and appreciative of zoning that better reflects the traditional Main Street designation. And so we encourage as strongly as possible a sensitivity in the site plans for these large properties, such as with further articulation of setbacks and some of these comments around buffering I think we would resonate with, as they border on residential and institutional uses that are really quite less complementary to height. And maybe just lastly for a minute on sustainable transportation and citizen safety. There's a number of questions that have surfaced for us around our table and from our membership, which we would seek the city's strong attention. So we raised a number of questions in our submission regarding transportation into and through Vanier, particularly around these gateway sites, but throughout the corridor. We really do believe that the secondary plan is strong in laying a groundwork for promoting active transportation and enhancing transit ridership, together pointing towards renewal of streets in an approach that is really not unlike a complete streets framework, which we do support. We know while improved facilities for cycling are identified, we know while a vision of main streets with 5-meter wide sidewalks is laudable, and while we emphatically support increasing pedestrian safety at our community's major intersections, and on that I would encourage anyone to take their cycle through the intersection of Montreal Road and the Vanier Parkway, which is designated a cycling route. I guess we're just uncertain of when these improvements are going to take place, because they do appear to be dependent on the redevelopment of adjacent properties. We know that increasingly our community wants to walk, cycle, and take transit. We see it in a level of activism for these alternative modes of transport. But we need these options to be safe and efficient, and that's one of the reasons why, linked to the secondary plan, we're going to join our voices with others in advocating for the Rideau River multi-use crossing and for a complete streets policy. But I guess, while we're fortunate to live in a community that has excellent sewers and pipes under Montreal Road, we also recognize that it's those kinds of infrastructure projects that frequently lead to some of the streetscaping improvements, cycling and pedestrian improvements on our streets. And so perhaps we'll leave you with a basic question, and that is, apart from a site-by-site approach through the site development process or through projects as they are submitted, what are some of the tools and resources, and can we work to identify tools and resources that the city can further offer to make the vision of a more pedestrian, cycling, and transit-friendly community real in the short term? So in closing, we really are excited about the potential that this plan presents for Vanier, and we look forward to the city's provision of and partnership with us and others on the tools and resources to make the plan become a reality. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to talk about the spot rezoning because you mentioned that. It's a bit of a challenge for us. I think what zoning is accompanying this this secondary plan?
The updated to the zoning basically includes generally the entire area updated to reflect the policies, except for the gateway sites like we've already discussed. And then there's also provisions for larger building height along the Vanier Parkway, and those sites haven't been rezoned either because, again, they're very complicated sites that would require site-specific rezoning to shrink wraps, if you will,
right,
where taller buildings could go and things like that.
To his point, we should know which sites are subject to a rezoning, consistent with the plan, and which sites already zoned in accordance with the plan.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
So we would have that. So, for instance, you'll be able to know whether it's the Belil site or the site, I don't know what we call it, the site where the beer store is.
Eastview Plaza, yes.
Eastview Plaza?
Yes.
Eastview Plaza site are sites that will have a site-specific zoning bylaw on it by design, and I guess that there are some other sites that we would be able to identify. But for the rest of it, we would not, they're zoned in conformity to the plan, so we would not expect to see site-specific rezoning applications. That would be supported by our plan. They'll be zoned as of right, and all they'll be required to do is get a building permit and a site plan if it's required, which is consistent with the direction that we've been trying to take with our new official plan. Now, you want to add a caveat.
I want to add one thing is that because especially with the provision for a potential for 7 stories on smaller sites along traditional main streets, if sites are amalgamated or something like that might meet that threshold, those criterias, you might see a slight increase to those. But again, it'd be through a zoning amendment process. It would be a public process.
So they can go from 6 to 7.
Exactly. If you meet the certain threshold criteria. But I would also say that the policies are very prescriptive. The height policies in the secondary plan are very prescriptive. So if someone wanted to go greater than what the policies say in the secondary plan, in my opinion, it would require an official plan amendment.
Right.
So that's a possibility, but it's.
So if I want to come along and in the 7-story zone, or if I own in the 6 zone, and I want to go to 7. The plan supports that, and I have to get an amendment. But if I want to go to 17, not only, which is my right to apply, not only would I have to amend the zoning bylaw, but I'd have to amend the secondary plan as well. And that's I would suggest a higher test.
It is a much higher test, yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions for the delegation? Councillor Fleury?
Just a comment on the, so it is an issue for us that the old city of Vanier in the 1990s did redo a lot of the underground work on Montreal Road, and that the street is quite outdated in terms of look and feel. Intersections are problematic. So we will look at a strategic investment for streetscaping along those corridors at some point. Because development is one way of going, but that won't provide the much-needed feel for the street.
Is that a question, Councillor, or just a statement?
I think I'll just take the 1 second to say, I mean, I think we see that there are tools that are being offered in the sense of Section 37 benefits and other benefits through applications. I think the one thing that we just want to ensure is that we don't see change and redevelopment or streetscaping happen on a site-by-site basis, but that it be guided by a coherent vision for the whole corridor. And I think that's something that I'm not quite sure we're there yet, or that's something that we would like to see further conversation on.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. Mr. Tremblay, if you'd like to come up. I know you guys don't like certainty, but hopefully we're not going to hear about that today.
You will.
Oh, God.
Miguel Tremblay, Fotan Consultants. I'm actually here on behalf of the owners of the East Gateway property. And I'm also here on behalf of the current owners and future owners of 112 Montreal Road, which is at the Vanier Parkway. I simply want to highlight our support for the secondary plan documents and the policy direction. In particular, for the East Gateway site, we are in agreement that the property is well suited for additional density given its size, its proximity to future and existing transit, and also because it does form part of an existing high-rise node, which this committee has considered on other applications on Saint Laurent Boulevard. We are supportive of the approach in that the vision for the owners is consistent with the policy direction expressed in the CDP, in the secondary plan document. I think we can fulfill those. It will likely be a joint venture on the East Gateway site with a commercial builder as well as a residential and maybe an employment builder. So, and all of their approach is consistent with the policy direction. On a broader level, related to transparency and flexibility, I do support the staff's approach in this case. This document is less prescriptive than other approaches in the city, and you've chosen to use your zoning to establish the direction. So the policy, good policy, should not be prescriptive. It should provide direction, and the zoning implements that. And I encourage the city to continue on this approach. This is the right way to do policy, in my opinion. Thank you. That's my remarks.
I thought that's what we were doing with the official plan, but okay, maybe I'm wrong. So anyway, thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Tremblay? No? Thank you very much, Mr. Tremblay. Now, sir, in the white T-shirt, I don't have any other speakers. If you'd like to come up, but I'm going to have to ask you to fill in for the public record. We'll provide you with a request to speak form. We need your name and your details so that we can formalize that for the public record of the proceedings. So if you'd like to come up to the... Pardon? No, you can fill it out after your comments and just provide it to the clerk, and we'll put you there. You go.
I'm a resident in Vanier in the mid-region of the zoning. I live at Ducharme. Now, when I've seen this expression of the ideology, the top Montreal, the north side, or the east side on Montreal Road, that's a cemetery. The visual expression of it, to make it look like a giant region, I don't think we as a culture are going to be digging up the cemetery and putting in architecture there. So that big yellow piece in the north on Montreal Road in Saint Laurent is not real in my interpretation. That right there. That's a cemetery, and it's been there ad infinitum in my existence. Now, the secondary, when I found this is a very good idea for development in the Vanier area. I've lived there 20 years, and I have a bachelor in architecture. When in Chicago, when I went to visit to see their architecture, Montreal Road would be a very, when I look at downtown Ottawa, in the Sandy Hill area, which we're conglomerating with, and the ideology of going with a walkway and bicycle path across the river in the future would even make it more accommodation between. That I find very good and very homogeneous with the bicycling. I'm a bicyclist all year. I've been since 1973. Now, but the fact that they're putting in, when I was at the meetings, my zone on Ducharme is an R2 level. That's 1.5, 2-story housing. But all around it, it's R4. The residential housing is all being transferred over into apartment buildings, 3 stories, 4 stories high, and they can put them higher. That is de-socializing it and conglomerating into one block. So that ideology I don't agree with. Now, on top of that, there is the fact that the people who are residential all in this Vanier area, it's a 1.5 to 2-story area, even though they are categorized as R4. That, I agree with them very much. We should be changing that back to a more humanistic. And now, on the idea of the lady that the speaker number 1 was stating about the noise dangers, a major factor that I noticed in Chicago was in their area, they had a lot of foliage. Now, both acoustically and chemically, the carbon in the atmosphere from automobiles is taken by the vegetation and turned into oxygen. And the other acoustically, if we were to try, I know it's but I was talking to these people and they were saying that the ideology of so many meters back that they were going to be buying or moving back for the places, then we would have more width to Montreal Road. The bicycle path's a very good idea, but if we were to put blocks of foliage down the middle, little islands in the middle of it, and they take the acoustics and the carbon out, and they defend the people against it. So that is another factor that I thought would be a good thing to be put in to the facts. Now, there's the fact, there's one other, just one moment. Okay, that was the statement when we were at the meeting with these representatives was the first so many meters back would be the 7-story, but then after that, further back, would be allow it up to 15-story under my interpretation of the verbal expression that they gave us. That, I do not comprehend the reality or reasoning in it. It is very much a residential area with 1.5 to 2-story homes. And it's not this. Then there is Corbusier's ideology of the clumps, in which every so many kilometers apart, they would be the high-rise buildings. Now, the Vanier Parkway does already have certain relativity to that, and the foliage around it does visually and acoustically and through the gas system of the automobiles does defend the residential area behind it. So down on the Vanier Parkway would be, under my interpretation, relative for the high-rise. But this other statement of 15-story back after the first so many meters off of Montreal Road of the 7-story, which does not seem, it seems dehumanizing. It's cubing people into boxes. ad infinitum. So I would like to put forward more towards the residential section and reusing the ideals of the traffic on Montreal Road with the gas ideology and the acoustics, as the speaker number one was stating, being defended.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there questions for the delegation? Nope. Thank you very much for your presentation. Those are all the speakers we have for this item. So if there are no other speakers, I'm going to close the public hearing portion of the meeting, and I'll turn the recommendation back to committee, which is, and I'll just find it here, that Planning Committee recommend Council approve an amendment to the official plan, Volume 2B, to delete the Vanier site-specific policies, an amendment to the official plan, Volume 2A, to incorporate Part B of the proposed official plan amendment as a secondary plan, as detailed in Document 2, and an amendment to the zoning bylaw 2A-250 as detailed and shown in Document 3. And we do have another motion because we missed a schedule. Is that what we did? Whereas Document 2 of the report does not include a land use schedule in the official plan amendment 127, be resolved that the attached Schedule 1 to Amendment 127 be included in Document 2 in Part B of the amendment. And that's the height schedule, I'm assuming?
Mr. Chair, it's actually the land use schedule that looks very similar to the colored version that's up on the screen there. It's just a black and white version.
Okay. Perfect. Councillor Fleury?
Puis-je conclure rapidement?
Rapidement.
Rapidement. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président. Alors, pour nous, ce fut un travail quand même reconnu de la part du département avec la communauté. Ce qu'on réalise, c'est que Vanier avait ses objectifs de centre-ville sur chemin Montréal, puis que maintenant, c'était plusieurs années plus tard, puis que ça nécessitait une revue. Puis en même temps, on voit qu'il y a certaines zones qui sont très prêtes pour le redéveloppement. Alors, ce qu'on voit, c'est le fruit d'une analyse approfondie pour rendre ce corridor-là beaucoup plus cohésif, beaucoup plus représentatif de ce que notre communauté a besoin. Vous avez entendu au niveau des piétons, au niveau du cyclisme, mais aussi au niveau du développement. On l'attend. Puis ce qu'on souhaite réellement, c'est de voir, vous en avez parlé, des sites qui sont d'usage mixte et non seulement des bureaux et non seulement du commercial. Alors, moi je vois ça d'un bel œil. C'est sûr que ça va être un peu du cas par cas pour voir le redéveloppement, mais en tant que vision, ça crée une vision pour le corridor qui est réellement besoin. Alors, je vous félicite puis je vous remercie là-dessus.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anybody else? So on the so the motion then that includes the schedule, is it carried? Okay. And on the item as amended, is it carried? Carried. Okay. So that concludes all of the held items. Are there any notices of motion for consideration at our next meeting? Are there any inquiries? Other business? Obviously not. Okay, we are adjourned. Our next meeting is Tuesday, the 8th of October. Thank you very much. There we go. Yeah. What's that?